Hi guys, welcome to Make to Explore YouTube channel. First of all, we thank all our subscribers and viewers for all the support and encouragement you have given to us. Now let's go to the Raspberry Pi website. Here is the Raspberry Pi website, raspberrypi.org documentation/pico/getting started. We will give this link in the description of this video. Here you will get all the information about Raspberry Pi Pico like a board specification we have seen earlier, pinout diagram and documentation like data sheets of Raspberry Pi Pico and microcontroller RP2040 and hardware design, getting started documentation and software development kits for Python and C++. So this all documentation and information you can get on this website. So we can program our Raspberry Pi Pico in two ways. One is with MicroPython and another is with C or C++. We'll program Raspberry Pi Pico using MicroPython now. So let's see what is MicroPython. MicroPython is a full implementation of Python 3 programming language that runs directly on embedded devices hardware like Raspberry Pi Pico. So you can get interactive prompt, the REPL, read, evaluate, print loop, REPL, which is means by console, to execute the commands immediately via USB serial and built-in file system. So let's install this MicroPython on our Raspberry Pi Pico. So they have given the procedure here. You can program your Pico by connecting to your computer via USB, then dragging and dropping firmware file. So this is the link to download this firmware file. You can go this is a MicroPython's website. There they have given the firmware for Raspberry Pi Pico, MicroPython firmware. So here is the latest version of firmware. You can click on that to download this firmware. So here it will prompt to where to save it. We will save it. This is a UF2 file. Click on save button. It will get saved. Now go again to Raspberry Pi website. We have just downloaded UF2 firmware. Then push and hold the boot select button and plug in your Pico into USB port or other Raspberry Pi computer or other computer. Release the boot select button after you connected the Pico to computer. So they have given the procedure here in animation. You have to push this button, boot select button, and connect this Raspberry Pi Pico via USB port. So it will mount the Raspberry Pi Pico as a mass storage device, which is called as RP2. So it will detect as a mass storage. Then you can drag and drop this MicroPython firmware file, UF2 file, onto that volume, and then Pico will get rebooted. So let's see on our hardware how to install this. So first we'll go to our Explorer. Here is the computer management. So we'll see how it will get detected as a booting device. You have to press the boot select button and then plug in your Raspberry Pi into USB port. So you can see here it is get detected as a boot device. And on our computer, let's go to where we have downloaded the firmware file. Here you can see on a computer, this is the Raspberry Pi will get mounted as a flash storage device. You can see here RPi RP2. Okay, now you have to drag and drop the downloaded UF2 file onto that device, onto this. So downloaded here, this is the RPi firmware file, MicroPython firmware file. So you have to just drag and download, drop on this RPi firmware device. So it will get programmed and it will get restarted. Now we have just installed this MicroPython on our Raspberry Pi Pico. So let's find out is it working or not. So for that you have to go to this IDE called as Thonny. So you can download this IDE using this link. Here is the link, thonny.org. It is a Python IDE for beginners. Download it as per your system like Windows, Mac or Linux. So we have downloaded and installed it on Windows because we have running it on a Windows machine. Let's move over to that IDE. So here is the interface of Thonny IDE. You can see here is the toolbar. where all these tools are given: run, debug, all this, start, stop. This is a script area or editor where you write the program, Python program, and this is a shell or REPL console, you can see here. So let's see our Raspberry Pi is connected or not, or let's connect it to this IDE. So you have to go to this bottom right of this IDE where this version of Python is given. By default it is showing as a same interpreter which runs on Thonny by default, which is a Python 3.7.9. So here are the given supported devices by this IDE, like a CircuitPython generic, Python, MicroPython on ESP8266, MicroPython on ESP32, and MicroPython on Raspberry Pi Pico. So we have to click on this option, and if our MicroPython is successfully installed on our Raspberry Pi Pico, we'll get a prompt here. So I will click on this now, and you can see here MicroPython version 1.14 successfully installed on Raspberry Pi Pico with RP2040. So I will run one command here. So you can see here we are now running the MicroPython on Raspberry Pi Pico. So we have seen how to set up the software of Raspberry Pi Pico. In next part we will see how to write MicroPython program to blink the onboard LED of RPi Pico.